I am also going to download a participants list in just a moment. I'm going to give that a moment so everyone can arrive. So, I've also got to manage the lobby. That's fine. So, as I said, welcome along and welcome to Mentor Clinic 1. We're going to have a look at the kind of the aims of this session in just a moment before we get into it. So, to start with, introductions. My name is Patrick Thorne. I am one of the visiting fellows here at Glenmore Winton. I'm also, like you, a mentor to one of our ACTs. I also lead the coaching program here at Glenmore Winton. And what we're going to do to start with is test out the breakout room function. And I've got a setup for how many people we've got. How many participants we have currently. We've got 18, so high setup. Pairs of 9 rooms. What I'd like us to do in those rooms is just briefly introduce ourselves to the person that we're put into a breakout room with, and just share briefly what it is the biggest idea that we have taken away from the ECF so far. I'm going to open those rooms now, and we've got 1 minute just to introduce ourselves to our pairs. That's opening. We will be assigned to those. Now. Hello everyone, welcome back. Hope that wasn't too uncomfortable for everyone. Thanks to say hello. You're going to be in a couple of discussions with that same person as we go through today's session. So first of all, what's the purpose of the mentor clinics? These clinics serve as an opportunity to share your practice, learn from each other and each other's experience, and further develop our knowledge on specific coaching models. As stated before in previous sessions, in the induction session, you may have already extensive experience in mentoring and in different coaching models. You may therefore be doing certain things in your coaching sessions which are really helpful and which others could also learn from. However, you might not necessarily have had the chance to reflect on what you're doing in your coaching, which makes you very effective in your role. So this session should provide an opportunity to do this as well. It should be a safe space where you can also challenge your thinking, certain aspects of instructional coaching, and not be afraid to question your existing practice. In terms of things that are inbounds and out of bounds, a couple of things that are inbounds, the instructional coaching specifically, modeling and implications for your practice, sharing challenges that you're facing in relation to providing a high quality model and potentially solutions to this. Things that are out of bounds perhaps wouldn't necessarily be helpful in our conversations today are wider logistical challenges that you or your teacher are having with the program. We'll support you with this at the end and where to access support for this. Other things we might not want to be talking about now is exploring alternative mentoring approaches. What are merits to other mentoring approaches? This program uses instructional coaching, and so our time is best spent learning and exploring this approach. So before we go into further detail on the session itself, we'll take a moment to recap on how we're going to work together. You'll recognize this slide. Be brave, be kind, be present. The way we're going to do those, make sure, please, with being brave, questions are really important. They're part of learning and they're welcome. If you have a question, please jot it down using the chat function or raise your hand using the function at the appropriate moment. Confidentiality, as we're a professional learning environment, and we may want to reflect on both strengths and challenges in our practice. To make people feel comfortable in doing so, it would be great if we could agree that what's brought up in these sessions stays in this space. As with any session, if issues raised result in a safeguarding concern, then these must still be recorded. Be present. So devices. We mentioned it's really important to be here and to get the most out of the session. With that in mind, really appreciate it if we could all give ourselves permission to disconnect from other devices and email distractions. Research actually shows that the visible presence of our phone can reduce cognitive capacity. So it'd be great if you could take a second to turn off devices and put on the out of office and emails. So we're going to look at how we will engage in this session. So we're going to be using cold call. Please be reassured, this isn't to check people out. It's not to make people feel awkward. It is to help us check understanding, to help you clarify your own understanding and hear a wide range of views. So you have a workbook for this session. Hopefully you have that either open on your device or printed for you. If you've not received it, there is a link right at the top of the comments now that you can find that from the STEP Lab webpage. In the top corner of the PowerPoint presentation, there may well be a red circle which says what page we're working on within the workbook, just so you know not exactly that, what page we're on. So, the quick do now quiz. This is in your workbook on page 3. Little multiple choice. We could have a go at this. Which of the following statements are true for basic memory model? And secondly, which of these statements are true about novices and experts? So you have the model in your workbook, like I said, on page 3. Another couple of seconds. This is really for yourself. So solutions to this. Long-term memory appears to be essentially infinite. A working memory can be easily overloaded. Novices have less extensive knowledge than experts. Is that the second of those answers? Now, the reason this is shared now is because we explore this in terms of how we can best help our novice teachers. So, moving on to the program itself. So, first of all, we're going to have a look at the features of instructional coaching, have a review of an example. Then we're going to look at another model. This is a task-based model as opposed to a performance-based model. The instructional coaching that you will have been taking part in so far with your ECT will have been a case of kind of stand up, demonstrate the technique that you're developing in a kind of performance manner. We're going to look at a task-based model a little bit later for when we get into things like the knowledge strand of the ECF. So, Ambition Institute have selected instructional coaching as their primary mechanism that mentors will use to support teachers on the program. This is because of the best evidence form of teacher development. The reason it's successful is it can be linked back to the way in which people learn and the differences between novice and expert learners. This can best be described through the active ingredients of instructional coaching, which you were introduced to as part of the induction. These are features that need to be included in instructional coaching sessions and relationships in order for instructional coaching to be effective. So the active ingredients are a clear model of better. Teachers are shown what the desired state should look like in practice to build their mental models. Without knowing what something should look like, the teacher is always going to struggle to recreate it in their own practice. Bite-sized areas for improvement. The area of focus needs to be small in order for it to be modelled, understood, and practiced, and feedback to be focused. If the area for improvement is too large, it may overload teachers' working memory, may not be able to be fully explored and practiced, and misconceptions could develop, or the action step not embedded into practice. Third active ingredient is the use of deliberate practice. It's not enough for mentors and teachers to talk about and explore the area for improvement. Teachers need to practice the area for improvement, receiving feedback and re-practice to support and embed changes into the practice. This process supports the knowledge move from working memory into long-term memory. A standardized routine should take place, so coaching should take place weekly for incremental changes to, over time, have a larger impact on practice, and for the teacher to see the impact and on their improvement. Let's recap the instructional coaching model used as part of the program. So the model needs to be concise and focused on the key elements. It avoids unnecessary additional information. For example, when modeling an action step about clarity of instructions, don't also model scanning the room, unless this is one of the success criteria. It builds on the teacher's mental model. The model involves making the mentor's thinking visible. It provides explicit links between the theory and the practice that's being demonstrated. As a mentor, you'll need to be explicit about why you're making certain choices. For example, as I'm writing an exit task to see if pupils know how to add fractions, I'm keeping the numbers simple because I want to reduce the risk of calculation errors, because I'm not checking pupils' calculation skills. To begin with, this is likely to be the most effective explanation, but as your ECT develops expertise, you can ask more questions, like moving from the I do to the we do stage. It puts the action step into the teacher's context. The model is tailored to the teacher's particular class or subject content, as well as their year group or phase. Note that this is contexts, plural, as the model will need to change given on the class that you're focused on, or the pupil, or the pupils that the teacher is targeting. For the model to be in context, it should be as close to real classroom practice as possible. For example, if modeling how to give instructions, you should stand in the part of the classroom where you do your explaining. Explain before or after the model why this is. If sharing a do now or starter activity, you would share the example on the planning templates used by that school. This supports the teacher to visualize the action step in their own practice. So let's look at the model in action again. Remember, this is a recap. So here's the context, and bear in mind this context is looking at a year one teacher. We're not looking at what we're being told by the teacher. She's going to teach us how to write the letter A. We all know how to do that. Much as in your mentoring, you know how to do the action step. It's about modeling the process. Okay, so we're going to watch this video of a mentor modeling an action step. In the video, we want to imagine that they are providing a model for a year one teacher. The mentor has already praised the progress from last week on Step Lab. We share the new action step and the success criteria with that teacher. The action step that the teacher is working towards, that the mentor is going to model, is break a process down into logical steps for pupils. The mentor is modeling to pupils how to form the letter A, explaining that this is, as part of the planning, their model of better. This is their model of better. The mentor used the development area videos on the Step Lab. You'll have experience now of Step Lab. You'll see that there's videos to help you kind of model how you're going to engage with that deliberate practice. And these development area videos cover more than one action step sometimes. So it's important for the mentor to adapt what they showed to the specific action steps. So let's look at the success criteria for this model. If you could have a read of those success criteria, they're also found on page 5 of your workbook. So the first 3 of these criteria, demonstration, authentic, exposes the thinking behind the model, relate to the model. But to decide if the example meets the last 2 criteria, we'll need to use a criteria from the action step, which are in grey. As you're watching the video, use the table to support you to analyse it. Put a tick next to the success criteria that have been met and a cross where it's not. At the end, we'll give you some time to write what went well, sharing your thoughts on what made the model effective. The model's been designed as an example of good practice. However, if you do see a next time try, please also write this down. So let's have a look at the model. And like I said, it's not about actually teaching us to write the letter A. It's about seeing how we can model the action step itself. I've just paused that because it has started for me. Can you double check that the sound is coming across? I can see Ross Goldsmith. Can you put a thumbs up if the sound was coming across? Marvellous, thank you. I paused again because what we're seeing here, it feels like, are we being really taught to write the letter A? That's not the point. She is standing in front of her mentee, demonstrating how she would put this instruction across. So hopefully you were able to compare that model, that performance-based model, against the success criteria. Did it provide a demonstration of the technique and strategy? Was it authentic? Was it as close to teacher practice as possible? And did it expose the thinking? Did it do? We like to use this whole idea first. Here's the whole step, and break it down into individual parts, and finally come back to the whole again. So do take a minute to think about what went well from that. We're going to go back into breakout rooms and have a 2-minute chat about what we think was good about it, what are the similarities within the practice that you might be using, and what ensured that the model was effective. So we're going to head to breakout rooms, see if I can manage that again, and we'll have 2 minutes.
Got it, full time. Is there?
Those are opening now. It takes a little while. Into notes.
All going okay, Paddy?
Oh, is it just you left behind?
And Lauren, by the looks of things. Lauren hasn't gone in one.
Oh. Might be nice at the beginning, so people arrived after.
Yeah, you might need to rejig the meeting rooms. I have to do that quite a lot.
People will go into different.
You might be able to add her in now. You just pick a room. I'll go and check in on the other one then.
Right.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a useful conversation there. We're all back now. So, notice that the model was as close to classroom practice as possible. The mentor is standing as she would in the classroom. She's addressing the class and uses the whiteboard as she would during lessons. The mentor has also demonstrated how the model exemplified the action step success criteria. This helps to build the teacher's mental model by linking their understanding of theory and seeing it in practice. The model of Better also draws attention to the difference between the teacher's current practice and the action step. Notice that the mentor focused her teacher's attention by using the whole, part, whole structure. She also avoided any extra information that would be distracting. For example, in a real lesson, she might explain to pupils what they should focus on before she started modelling. This isn't the focus of the action step, though, so the mentor didn't model it. The impact of this high-quality model would have been that the ECT would have been clear on what success looks like, but also feel comfortable to practice it themselves. This is something you may have found with your deliberate practice part of your instructional coaching. By standing up and doing it yourself, you make it the culture whereby your ECT might feel more comfortable in also engaging in the same practice. So let's consider an example of a different sort of model. This model is a demonstration, demonstration model. It demonstrates a technique or a strategy. It's going to be authentic. The model is delivered as though in front of a class without breaking out of role. This model is exposing thinking. It uses the whole part, whole structure. It covers all the criteria and it exemplifies the success criteria for the action step. There's nothing extra. Let's move on. So let's look at a task-based model. So there are two types of model that can be used in instructional coaching. So far, we focused on a performance-based model. In a performance-based model, you, as the mentor, are performing what action steps, what they look like in practice. Performance models are suitable for an action step that focuses on how things are delivered in the classroom. For example, a set of instructions, an explanation of a concept, or responding to behaviour in the classroom. We focused on this so far as part of the training, as the vast majority of the behaviour action steps are performance-based. However, as the focus switches to instruction and subject strands, task-based models will become more important. Examples of task-based models might include writing your lesson objectives, creating a do now or a starter, or scripting a series of questions to check for understanding. Remember, modelling aims to build the ECT's mental models, putting it into long-term memory. One aspect of this is exposing the thinking behind an example. For a strategy the teacher uses in a lesson, such as giving instructions, the mentor can provide a commentary as the model is performed. For elements of practice which result in a product, such as an objective or a piece of planning, the mentor needs to show the construction of the product as well as the final outcome. This means performance-based and task-based models look different. While there are differences between task and performance-based models, it's important that both types of models focus the teacher's attention. The model is concise and focused on the key elements. It avoids unnecessary additional information. It builds the teacher's mental model, so the model involves making the mentor's thinking visible. It provides explicit links between the theory and the practice that's being demonstrated. And it puts the action step into the teacher's context. So these are the same as before. The model is tailored to the teacher's particular class or subject context, as well as their year group and phase, including being as close to real-life classroom examples as possible. For example, the performance task models, the teacher would stand in the part of the room where the model's being delivered. For task-based practice, the example should be in the format that's used by the school or during lessons. Can be tempting with task-based models to talk through what the model looks like without actually showing an example. This has two detrimental effects. Firstly, it doesn't fully build the teacher's mental model of what that action step and success criteria look like in practice. Secondly, the culture of practice is not set up, meaning that the teacher will feel less comfortable practicing it themselves. Let's take a look then at a task-based model in action. The example that you're about to watch has been taken from the subject strand, specifically subject 2, planning backwards from the learning goals. The action step being modelled is ensure that the learning goals are achievable for pupils in the lesson. This is on page 6 of your workbook, by the way. With support of a colleague, use the information about your pupils to understand their starting points and break down the learning goals to understand the complexity of the material to be taught, to check if the learning goals are achievable and amend them when necessary. So the context is planning a secondary geography lesson. So success criteria are on page 6 of the workbook. Again, take a second to have a look at page 6. Read those success criteria. As you're watching the video in a moment, consider how the example has met the action step using the table on page 6 of your workbook. The end of the video will also give you some time to consider how the task model differs from the performance model and what the similarities are by answering the questions underneath the table. This time we'll have a go at cold calling and ask people to share some of their thoughts. Okay, so just a heads up on that. So let's have a look at the video. It's a 3-minute video. Once again, do let me know if you can't hear the sound. So we have some questions, things like how did the task-based model differ from the performance-based model? What were the similarities? And what ensured that the model was effective? Once again, we have an example of a whole example, broken down into parts and then back to the whole. Okay, so we'll give you a minute or so to just kind of gather some thoughts on similarities and differences between the task-based that we just looked at versus performance-based standing in the classroom and so on. And then once again, not to try and catch anyone out, but just to have some engagement and developmental discussion. And we'll call in a minute to ask some people to share some ideas. Okay, I'm going to ask Charlie Morrish. Should be able to unmute and maybe share some ideas, similarities and differences.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yep, good.
So I was looking at some of the similarities. It's still more of like a whole part whole approach, with the part really breaking down the mentor's thinking process and making it relevant to the teacher before recapping. It was like, after breaking it down, recapping the whole thing again, put it all back into context.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Just because I can see Ross Goldsmith, and I'd like to hear from Ross Goldsmith because I haven't spoken to Ross for a long time. Any other thoughts?
Hi, Pete. Sorry, Patrick. So it was very granular again. Sorry. Very granular again, so it could be broken down into small pieces and then built up kind of with each step, easily kind of being able to see if they've met it or not met it each time.
Thank you, Ross. Let's go for one more. I don't know at all. Tom Griffiths. Anything to add, if you would?
I just wanted to add that, like, through each part that was gone through, there was a clear reasoning behind why each part was being done. It wasn't just, said from start to finish like the previous model. Each bit was sort of chunked, and there was reason behind why it was done before recapping it all at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If anyone would like to add anything, please feel free to raise a hand so you can throw in a thought. No hands. Right, let's continue then. So, what sort of thing, so in terms of how it differed, some ideas that the mentor didn't model the moment in the classroom, or rather shared an aspect of their planning. This time the demonstration was part of the thought process, as has been discussed there. Similarities that you might have pointed out, they both showed what good looks like with regard to the action step. It built that teacher's mental model up to see what good looks like. The mentor still used, as we pointed out again, the whole part whole structure. What made it effective was that the mentor shared the model in its entirety before asking the teacher to share what was successful about it, just as they would in a performance-based model. The model meets the success criteria and shows the teacher what to aim for in their own practice. Through the discussion, the model met the following success criteria, making it impactful. It was concise, it focused the teacher's attention on the key elements, It avoids any unnecessary additional information. And the model builds the teacher's mental model by making the mentor's thinking visible. Again, all these things were pointed out, so thank you very much for that. So we're going to move into the final part of the session, which means that we are doing very well for time, so we'll be pleased to hear that. So here we're going to improve a non-example, a relatively poor example. So we're going to look at a scripted example for a model that needs improving. We'll spend some time individually just making some changes to improve it. It's a written case study. The action step is taken from behavior 5. This is something you might have already covered with your ECT, low-level disruption. And the action step has been selected for the teacher, which is know the behaviors you expect to see from pupils at different points in a lesson. They're in line with the school's policy and communicate them clearly and at the appropriate moment in your lesson. So let's take a look at the success criteria. Again, in your workbook, this time on page 8. Going across onto page 9. But please do take 30 seconds or so just to scan over the success criteria for the model and the action step. Once you've had a look at those, let's have a look at the script. And the script is on page 8. So please take a second to read through the script where it starts mentor seated, talking to the teacher at the table. Have a read of that, please. Think about success criteria and then take the next 5 minutes or so to rework that model. Okay, you'll see there's a space on page 9 of your workbook for you to improve and rework the model. How can it be developed so that those success criteria have been met? I'm going to mute myself for the next 5 minutes, you'll be pleased to hear. If you're really lucky, I'll even turn my camera off. If there are any questions during this time, please do put them in the chat. We'll continue for another 2 to 3 minutes. Then I will be asking for people to share how they might have improved that model. So hopefully that's enough time to have reworked that particular model. Hopefully, again, you managed to see what was rather shocking about the particular script that we were looking at there. So let's try a cold call again. Let's talk to Mr. Jamie Hart. Are you able to share with us any improvements or any changes?
Yeah, so it wasn't very authentic because it was kind of imagine I'm doing this as opposed to kind of standing up and role playing it as such. It's more of a discussion.
Okay, are you able to kind of extend on what the impact of that might have been? Why would that be a worse thing to do?
It kind of takes it out of the context a bit more because it then provides an opportunity for the mentee to kind of ask questions about, what would happen in this situation. And if you're standing up and kind of delivering as you were a lesson, you can kind of imagine those scenarios a bit more.
Yeah, say well, you can actually see the action step in context in its real life with a clear model of better. Thank you, Jamie. Let's go somewhere else. Let's talk to Lynn Challen. Are you able to share how you might have improved the model that we looked at?
I thought that the model could also be improved by the way that it was demonstrated. So rather than I might say this, it would have been better to have broken it down and actually say, well, I would like this to be completed in silence. If you're stuck, then you put your hand up and to do it sequentially in that way. I thought it was quite confusing the way that it was portrayed.
So yeah, the kind of monologue of I would do this, I would do that, I would do this, and so on. Actually, yeah. as in kind of the real context.
Yeah.
What it says in the book is that the mentor hasn't pretended that the class are in there. I'm not sure I agree with the word pretended because it's rehearsal of that performance, isn't it? Thank you, Tim. Let's take one more. Chris Sykes, are you able to share any improvements you were able to identify?
It wasn't very concise. It was a bit waffly, and he didn't break it down like we said. So it wasn't very granular, and it didn't really expose any thinking. Like he didn't say, or she didn't say, why is this a good model? What have I done well here? And they've just kind of said, well, here's what I would have done. You go off and think about what you would do instead of asking them to practice one themselves in front of them.
Great, well, thank you. Did anyone manage to rework it into a better version? Let's see if anyone volunteers. No volunteers for that. So on page 13 of the workbook, there is a re-scripted version of an improved model. Okay, so we can look at exactly the same action step, the same aims, the same success criteria, and we've got a reworked model of that for you to look at. Okay, so in terms of improvements, first of all, the mentor should always model it as if the class were there, and therefore keep it as close to classroom practice as possible. And in this model, they shared some phrases they might use, but they didn't stand up and rehearse as if the class was there in front of them. The teacher was not able to build a model in their mind, therefore, that the ECT was not able to see what better looks like. That teacher won't feel confident getting up if they're asked to do their deliberate practice part as well. They haven't had the kind of that part demonstrated to them. It's going to be quite uncomfortable. Model doesn't provide much of a model of better. It doesn't currently exemplify the action step. Don't just sit there and do nothing whilst you wait. Try another question. But remember, don't call out or it's not concise. Because the mentor doesn't model as though the class is there, the teacher doesn't get to hear what clear and confident looks like. Using the whole part, whole structure would help show the individual elements as well as the whole. So again, all these things that have been spoken about in your feedback, so thank you for that. So moving into the final stage, let's look at the barriers that we might face to effective modelling. I should have shown you this as we went through, sorry. So the barriers to effective modelling. So we know that there are many barriers to providing effective models for our teachers. But given the importance of modelling to the process that we're undergoing, it's important to spend time identifying these barriers and supporting each other with possible solutions. As part of the accompanying materials on Step Lab, you might have spent time reflecting on these questions. So what barriers are there to effective modelling on a weekly basis? What have you found to be supportive? What other solutions do you have? So take a minute to maybe remind yourselves of the reflections if you have done that part on Step Lab. So on page 10 of the workbook, we have a section to make a note and to reflect on potential barriers to effective model. Let's spend the next minute having a go at reflecting on those barriers. What are those barriers? What have you found supportive? What solutions might you have? In a moment, we'll share some ideas together, see if we can support each other with any barriers that have come up. So 1 minute to reflect. So hopefully that's enough time to have a look at reflection on some of the barriers for effective modelling on a weekly basis. I wonder if I might ask people to share if there were some particular barriers which they've even managed to overcome, or alternatively, if there are barriers which you've not managed to overcome. We have a moment to potentially suggest some things for each other's benefit. Can I start with Joe Soroka?
Hi, Patrick.
Joe.
So sorry, you're wanting to know sort of the barriers and anything
Barriers that we've got for weekly modelling with our ECTs?
I think the main thing that I found with my ECT that's worked is just making sure there's like a set time that's protected. I know it's really simple, it's nothing particularly groundbreaking, but ensuring that we know when we're meeting that that we're there on time and that we stick to it. But equally as well, not to contradict myself, but also if there is a really manic week, we do change it if needed, so we're able to be like present and be there rather than like thinking of our massive to-do lists. So I don't know how clear that is, but essentially having a set time, but also changing it if needed.
I think I understand. So you've got this time set aside, but if that's not going to work, you can move it, but make sure that it is actually moved to another set time. Is that what you're saying to me?
Yeah, basically. So you both know it's a valued time that you can get the most from it.
Thank you, Joe. Let's talk to somebody else. I haven't made a note of who I've spoken to and who I haven't, so if I call on you twice, I do apologise. Louise Deacon, are you able to share barriers that might have happened and potential solutions? It's the same location to model. Interesting. So can you actually access the same classroom to do your modelling? That's a good one. Thank you for that. I've got my chat open on the phone, so I was able to spot that. Thank you, Louise. Let's go one more. Brianna Fairbank.
So in a similar way to Joe, although mine's a barrier, I have to meet my ECT outside of hours because we don't have a timetable match, which can be protected. So we do have a time set aside out of hours and we have loyally stuck to it, but it's on a Friday at the end of the day. And so the barrier to effective modelling is both being very fresh and present on a Friday at the end of a very long week.
Well, I can sympathise with that entirely. That's exactly the situation I'm in with my my mentor also. Mentee, who am I? Thank you for that. So, but you've gone with it anyway, and you just have to kind of rise above it and try at least to be fresh and energetic and passionate, even last thing on a Friday. I think that's
lots of coffee is involved.
Coffee, excellent. These are great. These are solutions. Coffee is a solution from the science teacher. Anyone else would like to share potential barriers and even solutions? So, a common challenge, of course, is time. Is always going to be an issue within teaching, but it's important to understand that spending time preparing a model and modelling during the session is significantly going to improve that teacher's practice, which is why we applied to be mentors in the first place. Right, let's move on towards our final part of the session, reflections and next steps. So, again, workbook, page 11, we have a space to organise this thinking. So take the next 3 minutes to consider the following questions, also on page 11. How has your thinking about instructional coaching developed through the session today? What have you learned about modelling as part of instructional coaching? Can you give an example of where you need to use a task-based model, or when you need to use a performance-based model, or when you might need to use both strategies together? What will you do differently, perhaps, over the next coming weeks to put this new learning into practice with your teacher? So, a little bit squeeze for time, but 3 minutes to reflect on types of model and our own practice with our ECTs. Just another minute. I will be running another cold calling, I'm afraid. Not afraid to cold call. So I'm going to come to Sam Lanahan. Sam Lanahan, are you able to share any of your reflections with us?
Hi, Paddy. I found it really useful just to get to know the clarity on the success criteria and what it looks like. So making it authentic, making sure that you are concise with your language. And I think that was one of the barriers as well. Before you do your modelling, making sure that your sequential instructions are aligned to what they should be, and just spending some time before meeting and making sure that you've got all your sort of performance, your own performance in the right place really before you deliver it to them.
Yeah, StepLab's quite useful for that, isn't it? It gives you, or it encourages you to script out how you're going to model it and so on. And if you've done that before, it looks pretty slick in the actual mentor meeting itself. Thank you, Sam.
Yep.
Let's go for one more. Ella, are you still here? Yeah, Ella. Are you able to share some of your reflections, Ella Tucker?
Yes, I think similar with, I think my big thing is I tend to waffle quite a bit. So I think for me, it's just reconfirming that I need to actually think about what I'm saying and trying to keep that really like to the point, so I don't sort of go off on a tangent, come back and then tell a story and then come back, like really sticking to the point.
Thank you. Yeah, no, there is a danger to that, isn't there? And it stops it being that granular. And again, that whole part whole is useful. Here's the whole thing. Here's the part we're going to focus on. And now let's return to the whole. Well, let's finish off our session now. It is exactly 5:15. Feeling pretty smug with myself for that one. So thank you very much for your time and attention today. I'm going to finish with a reminder to look into your coaching on coaching sessions. Another part of the ECF is that you are also access to some coaching on your coaching. These will pop up on StepLab. My coachees haven't been assigned to me yet on StepLab, so that's maybe a work in progress. But be aware that over the course of the year, there'll be 2 sessions where you are going to receive some coaching on coaching. And please, again, just like today's session, it's all about development. It's all about just getting better all the time. And, you know, the more gung-ho you can kind of engage in that, all the better for you and your ECT. So we'll finish there. I will stop recording. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you in Mentor Clinic 2.